Welcome back to Truth to Life podcast. This is episode number 5, Facts vs. Fiction. On today's show, we're going to be talking everything COVID, from public data to mask efficiency and PCR testing. But before we get into that, I just want you to take a listen to this short clip. This was recorded in Parliament on record between Dr. Brendan Murphy, former government chief medical officer who currently sits as Secretary for Department of Health, and Jackie Lambie, a state senator from Tasmania representing the Palmer United Party. Take a listen to what they had to say about the COVID vaccine.
Ultimately, it's a decision of government, and we sort of really can't comment further than that.
Okay, if they say compensation is available through the courts and they're given indemnity insurance to vaccine suppliers...
Correct.
People can only get paid compensation if they go through the courts, so obviously the government would know this, and if it doesn't, it needs to get a handle on the situation. Most people cannot afford to go through the courts. They're delusional. That's the first thing. And by the way, they're chocked. So, and even if they win, which would be an uphill, that would be an uphill battle for them. Do you think that the lack of compensation system has to do with why people are so hesitant to go out and get a jab? Because trust me, Mr. Murphy, as a senator, I'm saying you're not compensated. I'm making that very clear to people out there. I'm not going to sit there and lie to them. So if something goes wrong, I'm telling them how hard it is, because that is my job as a senator. So how do you think the government's going to go by us telling the truth out there to the people that, you know what, if something goes wrong, you're stuffed? Because your government isn't going to look after you and you're not getting compensation.
I would hope you wouldn't say to the public that if something goes wrong, you're stuffed, Senator. That would not be good.
Well, that's the truth, Mr. Murphy. It takes years to get through a court system. If you do get sick from this stuff, you will get sick. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's not happening or that won't happen, because I'm not telling the truth, Mr. Murphy.
Thanks.
Okay, Senator Lambie, if we let Professor Murphy respond.
So, look, I don't think I can add anything more to it, Senator. That's been a decision of government.
Very interesting to hear what goes on behind closed doors. We're going to jump into the public data, and before we start that, I just want to let everyone know I resourced all this data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the Australian Department of Health website. All the data is current as of the 12th of August 2021. Okay, let's jump into it. So Australia's estimated population is currently sitting at 25,796,420 people. The number of days since COVID started in Australia, back on the 25th of January 2020, is now sitting at 566 days. We've had 37,754 cases total in Australia, of which 947 people have died. So in Australia, 0.0035% of the population has died from COVID. So statistically, you have a 1 in 27,240 chance of contracting COVID and dying from it in Australia based on our population. I'm going to put that into context for our listeners. So most of us have been to a showdown at some stage of our life. We walk in, full capacity, 50,000 plus supporters in the crowd. 2 of those people in that crowd will contract COVID and die based on these statistics, all right? So 2 people out of, say, 54,000 people at the game are going to contract COVID and die. All right, so given that number, would you not go to the football if you knew you had a 1 in 27,000 chance you could get a virus and die from it? I don't know about you guys, but 1 in 27,000 chance of going anywhere and getting anything done to you is pretty low. I would say, I don't know the exact data for it, but I'd say you'd probably have a higher chance of walking across the road and getting hit by a car. I'd love to see the data on that. If someone can give it to me, send it through. Currently, the survival rate of COVID worldwide is greater than 99.5%, depending on your age and any underlying health conditions. You have a 99.95% chance of survival if you're under 50 years of age. Not to mention, you would gain antibodies that could last you a lifetime. Something worth considering. I'd recommend that everyone re-listen to this episode when you get a chance with a pen and paper and write down the data on paper so you can visualize it And I bet you didn't know that 91.34% of all Australians who've died from COVID were 70 plus years old. 74.55% out of the total deaths recorded in Australia were 80 plus years old. Did you know that between January 1st, 2020 and November 24th, 2020, 126,974 certified deaths were recorded in Australia? Now, the baseline average over the last 5 years in the same date range is 127,872. That's 1,000 less people than the 5-year average, and you expect us, the Australian people, to shut down our businesses and our country for a virus that affects 0.0035% of the population? Please tell me if I'm missing something, because those numbers do not add up. We want this country open. We want kids to return to school. We want businesses open. We're sick of doing this. You told us 14 days to stop the spread. It's now been 566. We have had enough. All right, I'm going to bring the energy back down again, but I just want to leave you with one last fact, all right? Did you know that in 2019, 4,014 people in Australia died from influenza and pneumonia with an average age of 88.8 years old? Just think about that number and think about what we're doing right now to this country. The media are not reporting on the suicides that are happening in this country. The media aren't reporting on people that are losing their businesses at an alarming rate through the eastern states. The media is not reporting Lifeline calls have gone up over 300% in the last 6 months. Mental health is the biggest killer in this country right now. We've done our job as people of this country. We've given them 566 days to sort this out. It is not working. Not one country in the world has been able to eradicate COVID. We're not going to be the first country to do it. I guarantee you that. And for any of the listeners, if you have any friends or family in the eastern states, I highly urge you to check in on them. Just a simple phone call, text message, Messenger, Facebook, whatever you want to do, but reach out to them, because a lot of people are suffering in silence at the moment. They might even be too embarrassed to reach out and ask for help, or don't want to put their burden on anyone else. But it's very important in this time of our lives right now, in our current climate, that we support each other and we support our friends and family. So I've said enough about COVID data and my opinion on the matter. I think everyone's well aware where I stand with this. All right, so what we're going to do now is move across to the mask efficiency data, and I'm going to break down the different types of PPE, and we're going to go through their efficiency rating. And all this information that I'm going to be speaking about has been resourced from AAPS, which stands for the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. So let's start with the particle size of the virus itself. So the SARS-CoV-2 particle size is 0.125 of a micron. And just to give you some perspective on that, the end of a human hair is about 150 microns. All right, so surgical masks seem to be the most common masks that I'm seeing out people wearing. That's the blue cloth mask that you'll see doctors, dentists, people that perform operations wear, and now obviously the public. So they're very loose fitting and weren't really designed for the application that we're using them for. Basically, most medical personnel would use them to protect them against accidental contamination. So like when they're doing surgery on patients that have got open wounds, or to protect the wearer against splashes or sprays of bodily fluids. They aren't effective at blocking particles smaller than 100 microns. Would you believe that? So the particle size of COVID is 0.125 of a micron, yet the mask efficiency of a loosely fitted surgical mask is 100 microns. So anything below 100 microns, it cannot filter. So I get it. If you went to the doctors, say, and you had a virus or you had a head cold or whatever, and you're sneezing, coughing and all that, I would 100% support you if you said, look, I'm just going to put on this mask just so I don't get, when I sneeze, my droplets don't go over everyone. I think that's a perfect example of where they should be used. And a place where I believe they shouldn't be used is healthy people out in society doing their shopping, going for walks in public places. People are wearing, we are putting these masks on perfectly healthy human beings. That to me does not make any sense. And when you look at the science, because they keep telling us to trust the science tells us that these surgical masks do not filter anything under 100 microns. Well, that's pretty crazy considering the COVID particle size is 0.125 of a micron. That's over 1,000 times smaller than what that mask can efficiently filter out. All right, we'll move on to one of my favorites, the cloth mask. Hey, they look pretty cool. And if you are riding a motorbike and you want to stop bugs from getting in your mouth or bees, that's your go-to, I'd say. But the unfortunate news is when they tested it down to 0.3 of a micron, it had near zero efficiency at stopping the spread of SARS-CoV-2. So anyone wearing those cloth masks out there, hey, they look good, but they do absolutely nothing for you. All right, the next mask on the firing line is a properly fitted N95. These things will block up to 95% of tiny air particles down to 0.3 of a micron. So the SARS-CoV-2 particle is still 3 times smaller than what these things can filter out. So realistically, are they that great? Probably not. Definitely better than the surgical mask and the cloth mask. But a lot of tradies would use these, particularly if they're going in roof spaces or in high dust areas. They will do quite a good job of that. But unfortunately, when it comes to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, they don't work. Oh my God, I think we found it. Sound the cowbell, the HEPA. The HEPA, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's the high efficiency particle air filter that's capable of filtering down to 99.97% efficiency at a particle size equivalent of COVID. Make some noise. You will look like you're ready for chemical warfare, but who cares? This thing protects you. And for the great price of $300 and some, you will be protected from SARS-CoV-2 anywhere you go. Go check out my store. They're available now. All jokes aside though, that mask is the only one that I could find that would safely and effectively stop the spread and transmission of COVID-19 based on the particle size of 0.125 microns. All right, we're going to step into the last segment of the podcast, and I'm just going to cover it really quickly. The PCR test. This test was created in 1983 by Dr. Kary Mullis, who has a PhD. He was the one that was the leading scientist behind designing this test, and this test was used since the start of last year when the pandemic first begun across the whole world. So this is a standardized test that the entire world basically uses to detect COVID-19 in a person, and that's where we get our positive cases from, using that test itself. All right, so I'm going to play a clip, and this was a clip from quite a few years ago of Dr. Kary Mullis speaking about PCR testing at a convention that he was at. Take a listen.
Kary, how do they misuse PCR to estimate all these supposed free viral RNAs that may or may not be there?
I think misuse PCR is not quite. I don't think you can misuse PCR. No, the results, the interpretation of it. See, if you can say, if they could find this virus in you at all. And with PCR, if you do it well, you can find almost anything in anybody. It starts making you believe in the sort of Buddhist notion that everything is contained in everything else, right? I mean, because if you can amplify one single molecule up to something that you can really measure, which PCR can do, then there's just very few molecules that you don't have at least one single one of them in your body, okay? So that could be thought of as a misuse of it, just to claim that it's meaningful.
So I want to give you a direct quote from the inventor of the PCR test, Dr. Kary Mullis, and this is what he stated. Anyone can test positive from practically anything with a PCR test if you increase the cycle threshold enough. So basically he's saying how much you run and magnify the test will determine the outcome of that test. I also want to share with you another clip. This one's with Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's a physician scientist and immunologist, who's currently the director of National Institute of Infectious Disease in the US and is the chief medical advisor to the President Joe Biden. Have a listen to what he has to say about the PCR test.
Again, a good question. And what is now sort of evolving into a bit of a standard that if you get a cycle threshold of 35 or more, that the chances of it being replication competent are minuscule. So that if somebody, and we have patients, and it's very frustrating for the patients as well as for the physicians. Somebody comes in and they repeat their PCR and it's like 37 cycle threshold. But you almost never can culture virus from a 37 threshold cycle. So I think if somebody does come in with 37, 38, even 36, you got to say, it's just dead nucleotides, period.
Very interesting. I guess the question everyone's asking now is, what cycle threshold are we using in Australia? Let's find out.
Good afternoon, SA Pathology speaking. How can I help you?
G'day, it's Lachlan Down. How you going?
Good, how are you?
Not too bad. Hey, I was just hoping to speak to someone there just about the COVID-19 testing, obviously with the PCR, and just had a few questions to ask about that.
Yeah, I can see if I can help you with that if you like.
Okay, awesome. Just in particularly with the testing, so after the testing's done and it's sent off, do you guys handle that like SA Pathology or?
Yeah, so all of our tests are done on site at our Frome Road lab.
Okay, awesome. And where's the like the PCR actual testing done, like the magnification side of things?
That's all done here at Frome Road. Anything to do with the testing is done in our labs on site. We don't send it off anywhere else.
Yep. And what's the cycle threshold that you guys are running at the moment?
I'm not too sure about that, sorry.
Okay, because I'm pretty interested to find out. I'm doing a little research assignment at the moment, and I was just hoping to get that information. So would you be able to find out for me what the cycle threshold that you guys run currently at the clinic?
Yeah, I can call the lab and see if they know.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
Right, just one moment.
Thank you. What's the bet? They can't tell us. As time is of an essence, I've cut out the middle part of this because I was just on hold for quite a few minutes, and we'll get back to the call now.
Thanks so much for holding.
No worries.
Unfortunately, the only people available down the lab at the moment are lab techs, so they don't have access to that information.
Okay. Is there someone that would be able to get access for them if I gave you my number?
I don't know, sorry, because it would have to be one of the on-call medical scientists. I don't know what's going on with them at the moment.
Okay, so the lab techs aren't privy to that information.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So I'm guessing it's someone from the engineering side that comes in and programs them for us.
Yep. Yeah, I'm pretty keen to get that information. So is there a time that I can call back to get that information or?
I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm not even sure who I'd have to contact to get it if the lab staff don't know.
Okay. No, that's fine. All right. Thanks for your time.
All right, you're welcome. Sorry, I couldn't be any more assistance.
That's okay. See ya.
Bye.
So I rang 2 COVID-19 testing sites where they actually do the testing and then obviously send it off to SA Pathology. Both those sites, which I won't name, had no idea about the cycle threshold that was being performed. Obviously, they don't do the testing. It gets done on site through SA Pathology, but you would think being in that industry, you'd probably have some idea about what's going on, thresholds, rates, magnification. I would assume that most people in any industry with certain criteria would know information like that. It's pretty key information. So I rang SA Pathology, as you can hear on that last call. the lady that I spoke to didn't know what the cycle thresholds were either, which is fair enough. She's answering phones there and stuff like that. She rang the lab techs. The lab techs didn't know what the cycle thresholds were. And apparently, the only people that know about it, as far as she was aware, is the engineers, the people that set up the machines. So you're telling me you work for an industry, you work with these equipment every day and you run all the testing on site, but you don't know the cycle thresholds that you're running your PCR tests at? Don't know if I buy that, but anyway, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. So I went and did a bit more digging, and it wasn't hard to come by. On the New South Wales Health Government website, it clearly states that the cycle threshold that is currently being run for all PCR testing Australia-wide is between 40 and 45 cycles depending on the machine. And as we all know, well, as most of us would know, that when you're running cycle thresholds at that high rate, you're at risk of picking up dead RNA, and you're also at risk of getting a lot of false positives. And based on the current climate, false positives equates cases, and cases equates lockdowns. And that, if that's the case, no pun intended, we don't want to be at that spot. We want to have true, transparent testing. And the fact that COVID-19 PCR testing cannot even distinguish between the common cold and coronavirus is also another point that I thought I would add in for those that don't know that. You can access that data off the CDC's website directly. That PCR test will not be available to be used past December 31. As of December 31, they're going to be using a different type of testing, and they've already started using some of that testing in different parts of the world. It's a lot cheaper. PCR testing in Australia is $200 a pop from start to finish. So that's probably including from when it gets when it gets tested in those drive-thrus, it gets sent through, the lab techs get it, put it through the machine, get the results, bang, bang, start to finish, $200. Guess how many tests we've run in Australia to date since the coronavirus started? Have a guess. Just think about it. I'll tell you the answer. Over 25 million. 25 million times by $200. You do the math, and guess who's paid for all that? Taxpayers. We've paid that much money. How many people have died from coronavirus since the pandemic started? Currently, we're still under 1,000, and we've spent $200 times by 25 million. It's actually over 25 million now, but we'll round it down to a cool $5 billion. $5 billion of hard-earned taxpayers' money on a test kit that's, one, not accurate, and two, being thrown out at the end of the year because of that same reason. Let that sink in. Bit of homework for the listeners. Go look up the chemical ethylene oxide and have a look at the swabs that are used, the cotton bud sticks that they push up your nose, almost touching your brain when they do your PCR tests, and have a look at the surgical masks and see if there's a common trend with the ethylene oxide. I'll leave that one with you guys. Thanks everyone for tuning in to episode 5. Sorry it's taken me a little while to get this one out. Been a crazy last few weeks, and on top of that also got a 7-day Facebook ban for spreading truth. But it was good, and I hope everyone's families are doing well. We're in pretty tough times at the moment. Everyone stay united, stay strong, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Cheers, guys.